I mean, ultimately, I did replace the coil, spark plug, and stator. I just happened to have them, and CDI. So, yeah, that's a whole ignition system. Cheat sheets are blowing around. Where we last left off, we had finished troubleshooting the starting sequence, but we had no sparks. We had to move on to ignition. So today I'm going to go through ignition. I have my cheat sheets, 7 steps from the manual. See if I can manage not to have these blow away on me today. So step number 1 is a spark plug inspection. Pull the plug out, set it in the boot, and rest it on the metal somewhere in here. Then come up to your controls. There they go. Turn your run switch on, turn your key on, which our key is still hanging down in here. We had to replace this. Turn the key to on. At which point, press the start button and get in a position so you can look and see if your spark plug sitting on metal has spark. If it has spark, great. I mean, you don't have a problem. If no spark, move on to step 2. At this point, you can first, try replacing the spark plug. The other thing you can do is do a ignition spark test. So take your cap off underneath here, and this just twists off. You just spin this counterclockwise, comes off, and you'll have a little bit of wire exposed. Let me go get ultimately the other one. This is another spare that I had, the bad one, and show you. This is the one that was on here. Just so happens I had a spare in a drawer. Actually, I bought one, and the one I bought tested bad. So the spare one I had tested okay. In this case, I would strip this down a little bit, expose the metal you see right there, the wire on the inside, because that has to make contact with this screw in the bottom of the cap when you put this together. So what you can do is just expose that wire, hold it within, about a 1/4 inch of the metal on the head there, crank it again, and again a spark should jump from here. If that's the case and spark does jump, you might have a bad cap and or a bad plug. If not, move on to your next test. Let's go ahead and test this one here. The next test, test 4 actually in the manual, is to test for your on-off switch, which really we've done through the starting mechanism, which is to say if your red toggle switch there, if that's in an off position and you press the start button, it'll crank and do nothing. So key on. Actually, let's go test this. They say to test this switch. We know the switch is good because we either have no crank or we have crank. So test 5 is the ignition coil resistance test. So I'm going to test this one on my bench here. There's 2 tests. There's a primary coil test and a secondary coil test. So for your primary coil, we're looking to test about 1 ohm. So I'm going to go down here to 200 ohms, my lowest setting. And right now I have open line, and I'm going to test for resistance, which with resistance, move from open line to close to 0. 0.2, really close to 0, less than 1 ohm. And the primary coil is going to go from either of these ground lugs to this pin right here. And I can go either way with my brown, my red and my black, but once I do this, I should have, less than 1 ohm. By the manual, 0.72 to 0.98 at 68 degrees. We're at 0.4, so we're right within spec here. And if I were to swap these, you'll see it doesn't make any difference. That's the primary coil. The secondary coil should have a resistance of, let's check the manual here, 5.02 kiloohms to 6.79 kiloohms, again at 68 degrees. And that is going to go, that's going to go from the positive lug here lug I call it, to my wire. And let's make sure I get contact with the wire. Oh, and I've got to change this to, let's see, I'm going to go to 2,000, I'm going to go to 20,000, because I need 5 to 7, so 2,000 I'd be maxing it out. And here we go. So I got 2.7. That's not within spec of the you know, roughly 5 to 6.7. Let's play around. Can I get any better? .27, 2.9. So this is out of spec. This coil on the ATV is the one that it came with, and I could get intermittent spark. So ultimately I swapped this out from a spare, and I could get a full in-spec test reading. Moving on into my bucket of things here. Here is the stator that came with the ATV. Now we have a couple of tests we can do on here, but we have a challenge right off the word go in that this one that was on here didn't have a gray wire. So let's go ahead and do what tests we can. So source coil, that's this brown and this red, and you can do this on the quad. You don't have to take this off, but let's go ahead and we're going to probe brown to red. Let me get this spun around, and we're looking for about, oh boy, 270 ohms to 330 ohms. So I'm going to turn this down to 200 again, and let's see if I can get a connection here. Brown and red. 1 and 2. There we go. Oop. Open line. 200. Oh, it's too low because it wants to go to up to 330. So let's get ourselves back in here. Here we go. 298 ohms. So the source coil is in spec here between 270 and 330 at 68 degrees Fahrenheit. So this part of the stator tests out. That's the source coil. Now we're going to move to the pickup coil. That's these guys down here. We got a green, yellow, and we have what was part a gray and a blue. Just this gray, I believe somewhere in the harness, makes it through here, it gets spliced in somewhere. So we're going to test yellow to green and gray to blue. And they should be 180 to 220 ohms. So we can do the green yellow, 190 ohms, which is in spec. And here's the challenge on this. Blue to, there's no gray coming out here. I can't probe it here. Not sure how to test it. In theory, this should be fine. It's sold as such. It just kind of jumps down in. I just can't probe it from here. I'd probably have to open up the stator. I don't know. I'd have to probe from somewhere else. So I had another stator, a spare from the quad I built for my brother-in-law, tested through, and it tested 100% fine. So we swapped that in as well. I should also say that we kept swapping in because after we put in the tested good coil, we still didn't have spark. The spark plug that was in there was an NGK D7EA, which is one step colder than the plug it called for. The manual calls for an NGK D8EA. So put a new plug in, no spark. Coil tested bad, put a new coil in, tested fine. When you put the cap on and test, at that point you should be testing around 12 to 15,000 ohms. So without the cap testing the wire, that's that 5 to 6.7 thousand ohms. So put the cap on, tested through, all fine, still no spark. So went to that next step. We know the switch, the red toggle switch is good. Next step, going down to the stator. I couldn't test the full stator to know if that was bad. So I had a stator that had all the wiring, tested that. So now I have a known good stator, swapped that in. At that point, still had no spark. So from there, you're looking for faulty ground wires. Easy test. Put your voltmeter on to 20 volts or so. Put your positive on the positive of the battery. Put the negative on the grounding wire that goes to the motor, and test your grounding circuit there. You should see 12 volts or so. Also walk through your harness. Look for bad grounds if you can get your fingers on anything. Did that. Nothing. Still no spark. At that point, the only step left is the last step, CDI. Now, I had what I believed was a known good CDI because it had come off my brother-in-law's quad I was rebuilding. we rode it for a little while, so I do really believe it was a good CDI, knockoff CDI, but on this quad, no spark. So I bought another CDI, knockoff CDI, plugged it in, boom, spark. So the handy thing here was I may have had a good or bad stator. I know I had a bad coil. I know I had a spark plug that was one temperature range off. I think it still would have worked. But without that, I would have been throwing parts at everything. I mean, ultimately, I did replace the coil, spark plug, and stator. I just happened to have them, and CDI. So, yeah, that's a whole ignition system. So now we have spark. Yes. So having tested all that and did come back, and I did buy a new fuse harness. So in here is a 30 millimeter tube fuse. Bought this off Amazon. A little funny, this plastic, I like the OEM better. It's just a rubber seal. Makes me feel better about getting in the water. This is all I could find. Perhaps there's a marine grade, something out there. I don't know. So this is swapped in, and that's where we got the reliable crank, where we left off in that last video. Battery, swapped out I had the Mighty Max in here, so now we have an actual good battery. Now you can see as well, we've got our dash lights. We have a new filter. I need to oil the filter, but we have a new filter. I have done some ugly booger welding on the exhaust. This exhaust was split from here to here or so, took off the heat shield, ground it down, did some booger welding, and I got to clean this up and do a little more. I did this with my Harbor Freight welder and still struggled to get penetration on here. I didn't do this with the Lincoln Electric. Finally around on this side, before starting it up, I was able to get these bolts out. They're all goobered up inside, and this one, I didn't put this one back in. I have ordered replacement here and a replacement here. The one that I didn't put back in, this one's fine. And I did open this up, change the filter. Here's something concerning. You can see the amount of aluminum dust in this filter. This is one of the reasons I wanted to get this changed out, is because having taken these two chunks of aluminum, these two guys here out, and not knowing where they came or anything else, it's just spooky. So clean filter in, topped it off with 10W40 wet clutch. We're ready to crank and hold our breath. Bang. So I can hear the centrifugal clutch on the other side spin down. There's ticking going on up here. Could be valves smacking. I don't know. When I was starting it, there's a pretty loud clunk that came out down here around the starter. Also don't know about that. Got a loose screw down here. I was hitting with some PB blasters. Got to be tightened up. Some of these bolts are still really seized in here. This one isn't. I've got that one finger tight now. So I need to get this bolt loose to get in at the valves so I can do a valve adjustment. But there we go. We've now started and idled. I do have the hose clamp coming for this, oh boy, it just feels like this boot is big, like somebody bought like something from AutoZone. I do think, as I look through here looking at the Yamaha bond or whatever it is, that this transfer case was probably gone through. I've got to get this open and check for fluid levels. I have checked the front diff and the rear diff fluid. They're fine. Oil levels are fine. So let's see if this will roll forward in high, low, and reverse. So we're driving under our own power here. That was high gear, first in high gear, and then reverse, and then forward and low and reverse, and then back forward and high. So it's shifting through high, low, and reverse fine. Shifting feels a little tight. So big jumps forward, moving from testing the starter circuitry, the ignition circuitry, which I went through the actual troubleshooting of that off camera and just walked through that today, getting ourselves all the way to spark. Once we had spark, it started up pretty quick. Today with the temperature, didn't even need it on choke there. I want to take a look at the clutch side as well. I have a feeling that perhaps those pieces of aluminum came out of the clutch side, just from kind of looking at videos that I had done when I split the case on my brother's, my brother-in-law's YFM 350 ER. The 1989 YFM 350, the Moto 4. It's the same motor, but it doesn't have the transfer case on the back to go to four-wheel drive. All the same all the way through here, except this sliver is gone and you just connect right up. So that's the only difference. So from that experience, I am wondering if I might have had some of that aluminum might have come out from behind here. So my thought is I'm probably, because this thing is 600 pounds or so, probably going to do a come along up to the tree to a strap and then just tip this thing on its side. Then I don't have to drain the oil. I have to break my back working in here, then pop out these 8mm, loosen up this oil hose, and I should be able to pop this whole cover off. Actually, probably don't even need to take. This is the speedometer gear, or speedometer mileage gear, worm gear in here. So I'm going to set up to do that. The front brakes will need to be done. There's just nothing here. So these will need to be bled, gone through, see if this reservoir is holding. I'll have to do some rear brakes. We have some nuts and bolts. We have some plastic repair to do. But really, I'd say that I'm over the big hump on this one. It's a roller. It's a runner. We've just got to make it a little more reliable. I really want to take it for a spin. It's coming, but I also don't want to blow it up, so we're gonna go easy for a little while here. So I lost a little bit of fuel before I turned off the petcock there, but all good. My hope is that in doing this, I can pop this cover off and not have to change the oil. I'm hoping it won't come leaking all around here. So let me go get the impact and we'll take these 8mm off, and looks like this 12mm up top here. For the pieces of aluminum that broke off, I was wondering if some of it had broken off around this stud. I mean, I guess there's really no impact reason for it to. Looking around here, We're gonna make sure all this goes back together appropriately. There we go, mesh those gears, and that's how that sits. All of this, the bearings, all looks good. The centrifugal clutch here, nothing snapped out. I've seen some of these lobes here broken. A little hard, but if you get your finger down in here, looking to see how deeply there might be grooves worn in. I don't feel grooves. Just the visual inspection. This clutch looks fine to me. All the springs, all the teeth, even the oil looks fine, not full of shavings, anything like that. Inspecting in the case, you know, nothing cracked. Bunch of white up in here. Foaming, like the oil's foaming. Interesting. Now I can't see how worn these clutch plates might be into the aluminum clutch boss here. They don't look, I mean, it looks smooth from outside. I don't see it, doesn't look like it's all jagged like they're sticking. Guys, I see nothing on this clutch side that concerns me. Alright, flipped it back down and put some heat over onto my stuck screw on my my exhaust valve cover. So now I got my intake, my exhaust, got my timing belt cover off. Got to get this off. I'm going to do valve adjustments, see where they're at. But while I'm open, I've been kind of curious about this. This is the throttle cable, and it is throttle all the way down. As much slack as you can have on both sides. And there's no slack. And I kind of wonder if, you know, I could be running lean, but also the hanging RPMs could just be that my slide is not closing quite all the way. I'm going to take off this electrical tape. This is odd to me that there's all this electrical tape wrapping this throttle cable. I just don't know what to find under here. Be weird to find a spliced cable. Look at that. If I do this, I'm no doubt opening the throttle slide, preparing for this whole thing to run away. So ordinarily this is attached down at the carb body, so you can take up some slack, not hidden under electrical tape in the middle of your throttle cable. Alright, let's get this aligned to top dead center, and let's see where our valves are at. Let's find the T through our sight hole. I feel the compression strokes. I've got my plug in. And in theory, I'm either 180 degrees off or about to hit perfect top dead center here. And considering I feel the compression stroke, yep. There's my F. There's my T. There's top dead center. See, I have my T. I've got my mark on my timing gear aligned to my mark on my case, top dead center, and we just came at the compression stroke. So at top dead center, I've got play in there. Not bad. Let me go figure out what the spec is for both of these. 0.10. You know, it is just dragging. Just dragging. Really perfect. Perfect. It is just dragging in here. Yep. So with the valves in spec, ooh, feel this. Ooh. Feel all that play? I think I have a stretched timing chain. That feels, yeah, especially on this side. With the timing chain tensioner in, shouldn't be feeling any of that, and perhaps that's how it jumped timing before. Yeah, I've never seen anything that tight once the tensioner is in. I just cracked the bolts on the tensioner. There's no tension on here. I have a hunch when I take this off that when I checked the timing, I didn't release the spring to put the tension back on. May not have a stretched timing chain. May just have an assembly error. Oh, take that back. It's all the way in. Stretched timing chain. I have a hunch this is, when I started it up, I could hear some dinging, something here in the top end. Stretched timing chain is what I'm going to call here. We're going to get a new timing chain. Yucky. That's what that is. All right, that's enough for today. So let's get this all closed back up and give some consideration of that next step. So made progress. We are starting running. We're working through the gears, forward, high, low, reverse, idles. Valves are in spec, clutch is in good condition. So we've checked a lot of things out today. We've made some good progress. So gonna call it a wrap for a while. Till next time.